Hey there, this is Dan. You're watching The Salty Sea, and do you remember when I said I was going to do a series of videos on like specific challenges within Warcry, and then I did two and never touched it again? Well, here I am with number three. I have a really fun little video. Hopefully, I can get in and out of here within 15 minutes. You'll already know if I succeeded. About Brewgits. I've got my brew here with me right now, and I can't wait to get into it. It is Destruction's funniest fighter. Let's go. So before we talk about anything with the Brewgit, let's just look at what we've got here. For 70 points, you're getting 12 wounds, toughness 3, move 4. You actually get 4 attacks on 1-3 here, which for a support wizard is kind of nice. But what you're really taking it for is the ability. So pick a visible friendly fighter within 3 inches of this fighter. Until the end of the battle round, add 3 to the attack's characteristic of the next melee attack action made by that fighter. That is obviously amazing with a lot of the kind of high impact fighters that Destruction has. Destruction is the perfect faction to be pairing with Brewgit. I mean, Chaos could do it too. Chaos has like Fomeroid Crushers and things like that. But Order and Death, you certainly wouldn't be able to get up to as much nonsense if you had the same thing. So it's really powerful. Let's talk about how it kind of stacks up in game. And one of the things that I first want to note with the Brewgit is, like these other famous brewers, it loves doubles. Yes, I know it's not actually double. Most of the explosive Brewgit combos, you really want to have 2 doubles there. And that's actually kind of a nice place to be because you're guaranteed to be able to have 2 doubles after round 1 if you need to, if you're sort of planning things out and sort of using wild dice discipline. And even in round 1, you have to roll a straight to not be able to do it, which is pretty rare. But the really nice thing about having these Brewgit combos in your list is that you have the flexibility to only use 1 double, right? You can just do the Brewgit and save your onslaught or save your other double that's really good. And so being smart with that is really important. Knowing how much damage you have to get out of your Brewgit is really important because I think that tunnel vision with your Brewgit combos can lose you a game. Now, one thing to note also on Brewgits is I mostly talk about Brewgits in Warcry as far as their combo potential, but you can also kind of run them as just an incidental chaff model, right? This 4-2-1-3 profile I talked about, 12 wounds for 70 points is actually pretty good. Most of the time for 70 points, you're getting 10 wounds. The whole profile as a whole is really only slightly below rate. Obviously, it's awful if you're attacking into another chaff model that hasn't gone yet and you're getting countered on. That's a nightmare. You never want your Brewgit attacking in a sort of list that isn't a swarm list if you're fighting other things. But so the other kind of nice thing about Brewgits is that the things they pair with just are in a good spot in the meta right now in general. And I don't just mean the competitive meta, I mean the casual meta too, in that, high strength, low attack profiles, they don't get punished by counter, which, everybody's running around countering because that's the universal reaction. And it's really interesting to think about, the Spiker is the other Gabapalooza that has the mirror image ability of the Brewgit, where you add a bunch to strength instead of adding to attacks. And the fact that they cost it at 75 points instead of 70 really tells you what they think about an ability that combos with high attack models in this edition versus wanting to empower abilities that combo with low attack models. So it's really easy to run a Brewgit in a pretty normal list, or a list that's really normal other than the Brewgit, which is really nice. And I think gives you a lot more list building flexibility than just what we've seen so far. Even though some of the Brewgit lists we've seen so far have been like absolutely beautiful. So let's talk about the wicked pieces that we often see comboed with Brewgits. The Gutlord is sort of the more popular version of the package. So 350 points for a Gutlord plus a Brewgit. With Onslaught, you are threatening 20 to 40 damage, guess you could say 15 to 45, but 20 to 40 damage against toughness 5 in a 6-inch bubble. Your average is going to be 29. That is incredible. And then the Gutlord also has the ability on the Maw Path to get +3 move, which means that you can threaten 15 to 35 damage, and really we could say 10 to 40 versus toughness 5 in a 9-inch bubble. And your average there is going to be 25. So when you really roll hot with a Gutlord, you can kill anything in the game. Now, we could have other questions about whether you need that very often. When do you need that? I think Justin Orton talked about how he really only chose a Gutlord for his list because he knew he might go up against a Chimera, because other Brewgit combos were maybe more points efficient when it came to killing things where you don't have to put out 45 damage at a time, right? But it is sort of the most output you can have in one activation in Warcry is a Gutlord that is sort of getting Brewgitted and then using its own onslaught. It is completely overwhelming and really great to have in a lot of different mission types, and something that if you are playing a tournament that is going to have a few different like brawl missions in it that's not mostly objective missions, you have to think about the possibility of a Gutlord and a Brewgit coming after you. The other popular one is a Mega Boss. It costs $2.95 for the package, so much more compact. And charge is just really nice. With charge, you have a ton of flexibility for how you use Mega Bosses, with or without a Brewgit. And you have a 4-inch bubble of threatening 20 to 40 damage, just like the Gutlord does. So for things that are pretty close, and your average is actually a little bit higher at 30. I mean, that's not enough to really matter. Your range is 20 to 40. So you can be pretty confident of one-shot killing a lot of the leaders in the game for just 30 points for this package. And even when they're toughness 5, not just T4. In a 7-inch bubble, which is, again, quite a bit of range, you have 12 to 28 damage as your sort of expected spread, which is not quite as impressive, but is still an overwhelming amount. And even 12 on the low end for something that you're coming in 7 away, and then the fact that you can potentially spike up to almost 30 is really incredible. So the Mega Boss is sort of the more compact version of the package, but, it's your choice about whether you need that extra output for 55 points more. These are the two fighters that go with the Brewgit, where this is what the combo does. It's wild, and these are the two most popular. But I do want to highlight some other notable ones, because Destruction has a lot of options. So one is the Rockgut Troggoth. It's only 185 points, but any Destruction can take it any of the time. It's just a Thrall. 255 for the whole package. 9 to 21 damage versus toughness 4 in a 5-inch bubble, which is just a nice little boost. The thing that's cool about Rockgut Troggoths is they're very hard to kill for their points. 28 wounds, toughness 5 for only 185 points. So this is the kind of thing that you might just include anyway. And then having a Brewgit just in the neighborhood can really boost it up. This is something for, an incidental Brewgit combo that can just get really pumped up really quick. Crusher is more like you're doing this on purpose. This is kind of halfway in between the Mega Boss and the Gutlord. I haven't seen a ton of people opt for Crushers, but I do think it's very viable if you're looking for something halfway between those two. If you're using Onslaught, you can threaten a 5-inch bubble of 16 to 36 damage against toughness 4. Your average is going to be 26. If you're doing on the Maw Path for an 8-inch bubble of threat range, you're looking at 12 to 32 damage. Now that's a really wide amount there, but your average is going to be 23. Then you can also stick with Iron Jaws. Brute bosses with Boss Choppas, they also have that Umessin ability, so this is another fighter that you see run in lists that aren't even Brewgit lists, because it's just a nice little utility leader for Iron Jaws. And if you do just happen to have a Brewgit in that Iron Jaws list, you get 15 to 30 damage versus toughness 5 at a 4-inch bubble. That's a really impressive amount. Your average is 22.5, so your odds of one-shot killing a lot of Stormcast is actually okay, right? For such a cheap model. I think this is, I should have written this down, but I think it's 190 points, so the whole package is going to be 260. And then you're looking at 9 to 21 damage versus toughness 5 at a 7-inch bubble. Your average is going to be 15, but again, I do these ranges because 9 to 21, every outcome within that range happens at a high percentage. So you really need to be ready to do any amount in between there. The last three are the Ardboy boss, which I love as the sort of most compact thing that combos really crazily with a Brewgit. 12 to 27 damage in the 4-inch bubble. Again, this is just huge output for a 135 point model. It's absolutely absurd. Your average is 20, which is killing again, this is toughness 4, so this is killing a bespoke leader, killing any support wizard that people are bringing, like any ability hero, things like that. And then you're looking at 6 to 18 damage versus toughness 4 in a 7-inch bubble. This is hunting down treasure carriers at 7 inches away and averaging 12 damage against them. This is really impressive for a 135 point model. Now, Killaboss with Flail. I'm including this here because, again, I'm talking about how incidental, just random Brewgits and things aren't necessarily explored as much as I think they should be. And I think Killaboss with Flail is a somewhat popular Cruel Boys leader who I think is pretty good on his own, but works better with Brewgit than you'd think, right? Because the venom-crusted weapons gives +1 to hit and crit damage, and the Brewgit gives +3 to attacks, so they sort of, they scale off of each other, right? And so that's really nice. So when you're using both, they're just 2 doubles, so this is the same as every other combo here. But you're looking at 9 to 24 damage versus toughness 4 in a 5-inch bubble. Your average is 16. That's really impressive. I didn't actually put the numbers here for toughness 3 because it's just silly. You one-shot basically any toughness 3 fighter. The Killaboss with Flail has strength 4, so it deals a lot more damage to toughness 3, and venom-crusted weapons sort of multiplies that even more. The Killaboss with Flail is really nice because it can just destroy toughness 3 stuff anywhere it looks, kind of regardless of whether it's hanging out with a Brewgit. And so getting that combo with Venom Crusted can be pretty silly if you ever have sort of a high wound T3 fighter you need to get rid of. But then even against toughness 5, this combo can be kind of nice because you probably don't use Venom Crusted in that situation, but Killaboss with Flail critting at 5, giving it 3 extra attacks, can really let you melt toughness 5, toughness 6, 7 fighters. Maybe not the best point for point against T5, but against like annihilators at T6, T7, knowing that you crit on 5, all of a sudden you're just really terrifying to them because multiples of 5 are so threatening to the 20 health that they've got. Lastly, but not least at all, I want to talk about the Loon Boss on Cave Squig. They have a triple called Madcap Destruction. It's pretty wild. They get a bonus move equal to double the value of their dice roll. I'm going with 3s here. You're usually going to have better than 3s, but these numbers are so impressive just with 3s that I think you should check it out. So you're looking at 17 to 30 damage versus toughness 4 in a 7-inch bubble. This is, you get, the move is equal to double the value of the dice, so that's 3s plus 1-inch range, 7-inch bubble. And then the output is sort of 14 to 26 on average, or sorry, 14 to 27 on average, but then you are, adding the 3 damage that you get from just the ability. You get 3 automatic damage. And so the floor on this combo is insane. The fact that you really aren't going to do worse than 17 damage very often is just completely mind-blowing to me, and just really, really impressive as an ability. And then when you get this up to 4s, it's totally absurd because then you're looking at 9-inch range. You're looking at, knowing that you'll at least do 18, and then, the chances of you destroying a, 20 wound fighter in one shot are just really, really high. It's really impressive. But if you don't have that triple, it's still pretty good. I mean, you have 8 to 29 damage. I know that's a really wide range, but that's because there's a pretty swingy profile going on here versus toughness 4 and a 10-inch bubble. Your average is going to be just short of 15, so that's, really impressive numbers. Loon bosses are just really wild what you can do with a Brewgit on a loon boss. And Boingrot Bounder bosses kind of can play the same role, they just have one less strength is all. But they can also be incredibly impressive. So I want to talk a little bit about, how Brewgits are doing. So I'm going to, for most people watching this, there will also be a sort of Warcry meta video that's come out where I'll have all the faction stats. I'm compiling them right now. I'll be recording soon, and the video will come out 1 or 2 days after this video comes out. And one of the things I've noticed is that these sort of Brewgit destruction lists are really dominating when the tournament pack is very brawl heavy, when they're, maybe 3 out of 4 of the missions just have a lot of fighting in a couple condensed points. And these sort of Brewgit lists are not necessarily doing all that well in sort of spread out objective missions. I wanted to talk about why that is, because I do think the Brewgit has a lot of value in those objective missions. So let's get into first, why it's failed sometimes. And that is, in the Rumble pack, which is 5 objective missions and 1 brawl mission, I think Destruction Soup, it's easy to misbuild it because the temptation for Destruction Soup is to just bring in the wildest, craziest, big destruction titans that kill everything in the game, right? I mean, I didn't even talk about Tyrants here, which is the, scariest one-on-one battler in the entire game. Even Chimeras, right, don't really beat it. But the thing about Tyrants is they're not great for objective missions because it's 315 points in one model that isn't really fast enough to go to any objective on the board, right? These Titans are kind of constrained to only really dominate one sort of quarter of the board. And you usually get to pick, especially with Ogres with On the Maw Path or Iron Jaws with Charge, you have a lot of agency in rounds 1 and 2 to decide which quarter of the board you're going to completely dominate with your Titan model. But once you're there, it's actually very difficult to switch. And so putting a ton of points to just having one of them or just having 2, if you have 2, it's going to be really hard to keep your numbers up to really play those objective missions. It is possible, if you take a look at Justin Orton's Adepticon list, it is possible to get 9 models. But even then, for the most part, I would be worried there because those Noblars just lose their fights on the objectives. These objective missions, something that... Okay, so I'll sort of be covering both at once, I suppose. Something that really matters a lot in brawl missions is whether your scariest fighter can beat their scariest fighter in a fight. And that kind of dictates the terms of engagement around whatever you're brawling for. But in objective missions with lots of objectives, that matters a lot less compared to whether your chaff beats their chaff in a fight. Point for point, And so I think it's better to focus on cheaper combos. And the Brewgit is cheap enough at 70 points with 12 wounds. It's not going to just get killed by other chaff models. Destruction has the juice with Ardboys and Gut Rippas to have fighters that either, in the Gut Rippa case, moves around well, doesn't die on objectives, or in the Ardboy case, can get in there and just win the point for point, just killing stuff on the objective. And so your Brewgit may have to, spend that ability on slightly cheaper things, but it's still going to be just as important and just as high impact. And the Brewgit's just body at 70 points is going to really matter in those situations. So if you're looking to kind of build a Brewgit list for the Rumble Pack, you should be able to get to 9 fighters with a Brewgit in your list. And you just might need to, even if you don't have the cheapest chaff, you might just need to do things like that Ardboy boss or that Killaboss, some of the cheaper things that you can use, or say those Trogoths, stuff like that, and just still get a lot of numbers, but you don't need to spike 40 damage with your Brewgit combo if you're in an objective mission. The most you're going to really need to spike is like, say, 20 damage or something like that to sort of take out their chaff killer, or put so much damage onto their dragon that now their dragon can't just run around killing random stuff. Now, let's also ask why Brewgit lists keep dominating brawl packs, brawl heavy tournaments. And I mentioned it before, but there's a ton of these missions where, and I like to do Hidden Vault as the biggest example. This is a core book mission where it's 3 objectives, you delete 2. There's always going to be time for each scariest fighter to meet by round 2 in what is inevitably going to be the final objective. And the scarier one, the one that's going to win the fight, is just going to toss the other one off the objective and then have time to kill another thing in round 4 and be able to body block another thing from getting onto the objective. And so your scariest fighter is going to be worth 3 and get rid of theirs. And probably more than 3, because in body blocking your opponent, you'll often get more than just one fighter who can't get on the objective and make room for more fighters of your own. So having the highest single output can be really, really valuable in these brawl missions. And so these titans that are able to use abilities to get to where they need early, but then really just stay there and just dominate a certain section of the board with a Brewgit backing them up, is just a completely overwhelming force to fight against. The thing that I think makes it sort of more dominant seeming in some tournaments than I think it necessarily could be in the future is a few stuff. One is nets are really great in brawls because, if you can stop the opponent's scariest fighter from reaching the important big brawl, then yours gets to dominate before the other one comes in. Chaos and Order netter warbands are kind of inconvenient to collect. Chaos because all the netters are locked behind 1 per box bespoke warbands. And then in Order, I don't know, you just never see Sylvaneth people with Spite Revenants. And Spite Revenants are really good, but you just don't see them. And so I think that's a big part of why Brewgit heavy, netter plus Brewgit plus Titan destruction lists have really dominated these brawl packs. But there are a lot of weapons to either, disrupt the Brewgit combo, where, for example, if your Brewgit boosts up a big Titan fighter and then your opponent just throws a net on it and it can't move, well, that's just awful for you. I mean, because you've dedicated a double and 250 points to something and it's now not doing anything this round. So there are ways to kind of deal with the Brewgit. One thing that is really nice for it is that at 12 wounds, it's really difficult to actually just like burn one off the table. I think Caradron Overlords can do it and also be a really powerful list. But otherwise, the factions that I think of that can do it are things like Stormcast if you take one of their artillery models. Those artillery pieces, all the Stormcast archer leaders, they were really nice in monster meta because they could bracket monsters from far away. But since monster meta has kind of gone away, they tend to just lose if you bring one of those into your warband, because it just costs so many points for something that isn't going on to the objective and fighting on the objective. But what they are really good at is sniping Brewgits off the table. So maybe one could ally one of those into a warband that has a lot of numbers, but then, why aren't you just playing KO at that point? There are sort of, I'm alluding to, there are ways to deal with Brewgits, but those are kind of the reasons why they keep dominating these packs. I know some people are talking about sort of whether the Brewgit should be nerfed to be +2 attacks or to maybe cost 90 points instead of 70. And that's a tough one for me because it's good in half of the game, and it's really it. Whether it's the best thing you can be doing in that half of the game, I don't know. It's more up for debate, but it is really, really good, and it's definitely one of the best things you can be doing in that half of the game. The thing is, I think it's up to folks to kind of unlock the best ways to use it in objective missions before we can really say that it's unbalancing anything. For now, I really think Brewgits are, wholesome fun that stops being fun depending on what choices the tournament organizer has made. So that's everything I've got on this one model. I kind of blew out discussion on one just single fighter in the game for as long as it could handle, but I think it's a really influential fighter in Warcry right now, and one that I think a lot of people have fun with because it's both incredibly charismatic and the combo element I think appeals to a lot of people. So I'll be releasing some videos on continuing my lists for every faction series, and then also showing a lot of the tournament stats that we've got lately, because we actually do have win rates for every faction now, or most factions, which is pretty exciting. So until those come out, may all your rolls be crits.